Hello and good morning. Welcome or welcome back to the channel. We're on another journey today and there's a lot to go through, so I'm going to get into it right away. Beginning here with an excerpt from Reading and Writing in the Spake Zarathustra. Courageous, unconcerned, scornful, coercive, so wisdom wants us. She is a woman and ever loveth only a warrior. Ye tell me, life is hard to bear, but for what purpose should ye have your pride in the morning and your resignation in the evening? Right? He's saying, what even entitles you to say such things? Especially when something like culture has made it so damn easy compared to what previous humanity has had to deal with. Yet there's a reason why, and we're going to get into it. It is the matter of culture itself. Life is hard to bear, but do not affect to be so delicate. We are all of us fine sumpter asses and assesses, she-asses. What have we in common with the rosebud, which trembleth because a drop of dew has formed upon it? It is true we love life, not because we are wont to live, but because we are wont to love. Right? He's saying we already live. It's not, we don't love life because we want to live. We love life because we want to love. So if it doesn't have or serve that purpose, right, this is going to get into my critiques of modern culture. See, I'm already doing it. And that's to say that, there is no modern culture. There aren't much of a modern people except in small, generally, what's the word, familial settings. And beyond that, it's everyone is in it for themselves. People are in it for their own little vision of the future, right? There isn't within, and I'm speaking specifically of the last man, the mass-produced culture of the modern age, where people are just made and tossed forth by the hundreds of millions and billions, right? With no actual regard as to what's happening or why. It's just all, basically they're slaves. They're grist for the mill. That's what they are, is they're grist for the mill is what it is. They're people to feed on. There's always some madness in love, but there's always also some method in madness. And to me also, who appreciate life, the butterflies and soap bubbles and whatever is like them amongst us seem to most enjoy happiness. To see these light, foolish, pretty, lively little sprites flit about, that moveth Zarathustra to tears and songs. I should only believe in a God that would know how to dance. And when I saw my devil, I found him serious, thorough, profound, solemn. He was the spirit of gravity. Through him all things fall. Not by wrath, but by laughter do we slay. Come, let us slay the spirit of gravity. I learned to walk. Since then I have let myself run. I learned to fly. Since then I do not need pushing in order to move from a spot. Now am I light, now do I fly. Now do I see myself under myself. Now there danceth a God in me. Thus spake Zarathustra. So it's beyond transcendence. It's beyond old terms of enlightenment and alienation and whatever presumptions people have about life and religion. Because you live long enough, what you find out is religion and culture aren't your friends. They're mechanisms meant for children, right? It's how you bring children in accord with the world. And then to base an entire adult life off of these minimal, bare bones models, which are primarily meant to censor thought and feeling, to repress thought and feeling, to control them, to feed off of them. So when Nietzsche talks about the spirit of gravity in Zarathustra and otherwise, he's talking about culture. He's talking about law and order itself. He's talking about all the drones that make up a population who say, we know what the value of things, we know what is right and wrong, we don't want change, we don't want to listen to anything new, we already know this and that, that on down the line, that the whole thing is anti-flux, anti-change. That's the point of a culture, to reach a sort of stasis in which you can live in the world, and everything about the future seems to indicate that there's far too many people to carry on like we once naively and innocently did. Even with, as Nietzsche saying, that in the modern times, it's not the art-needing man, it's not the artist who sets the terms, it's not power, any kind of visible power, you could say, that sets the terms. It's the lowest common denominators sets the terms. The whole world is defined by a wrapping up in a cobweb of just wasting people's time, because we've been doing this song and dance for thousands and thousands of years. And when you realize how dangerous people are, you do have to bind them. And then what we're seeing is the net effects of this arguably insane attempt to bind the world to one way of doing business, one way of thinking, one religion, all of these forms of stasis of thought and feeling and being that are utterly delusional. So, resuming here, it's delusional on one hand, but then it's the reality of culture and life on the other. So this is aphorism 380 in book 5 of the Gay Science. The Wanderer speaks. If one would like to see our European morality for once as it looks from a distance, and if one would like to measure it against other moralities, past and future, then one has to proceed like a wanderer who wants to know how high the towers in a town are. He leaves the town. Thoughts about moral prejudices, in quotations, if they are not meant to be prejudices about prejudices, presuppose a position outside morality, some point beyond good and evil. And he's saying to even understand a culture, you'd have to exist outside of it. And this is what I'm kind of getting at. Once you understand culture, like all wise men and shamans, what they've always shared in common through history, anchorites like Zarathustra here, what they share in common is their position as outsiders. And what the outsider sees is, again, culture and law is a game for superstitious children. And that the people here are generally so hapless and gone on it that their egos cannot handle reality. And so repression, delusions, everyone's in it for themselves, everyone's left to marinate and stew in their own little world, the end result is collective psychosis and insanity. And that's actually normal. And that was the only thing that could result from a Christian and now secular morality that belongs to a state and an institution, right? And all belief therein belongs there too as well. So this is what he's talking about. He's talking about getting outside of it, and then you see that, oh, these are very narrow bounds for very narrow minds, right? So he goes on. So beyond good and evil, to which one has to rise, climb, or fly. And in the present case, at least a point beyond our good and evil, right? What we presume to be that. A freedom from everything, European, by which I mean the sum of the imperious value judgments that have become part of our flesh and blood, right? It's conditioned in physiologically at this point. Most people accept slavery as their lot in life. That one wants to go precisely out there, up there, may be minor madness, a peculiar and unreasonable you must. For we seekers for knowledge also have our idiosyncrasies of unfree will. He means that which drives and compels the artist, the thinker, the philosopher, that their will is driven to, no different than anyone else. The question is whether one really can get up there. This may depend on manifold conditions. In the main, the question is, how light or heavy are we? The problem of our specific gravity, and that's in quotation marks, right? So how much is law and order and the voices of dead tyrants and living tyrants alive inside of you? One has to be very light to drive one's will to knowledge into such a distance, and, as it were, beyond one's time, to create for oneself eyes to survey millennia, and moreover, clear skies in these eyes, meaning they're not shadowed by what was, what is, or what will be. One must have liberated oneself from many things and that oppress, inhibit, hold down, and make heavy precisely us Europeans today. And I mean that when I say Europeans here, I'm including Americans in that, right? Where did they come from? They didn't just pop up out of the earth, as maybe a Socrates might suggest. So the human being of such a beyond who wants to behold the supreme measure of value of his time must first of all overcome this time in himself, right? To think, because this is kind of what he talks about with the last man. Everyone thinks, oh, we already know the value of things. We figured it out. We have discovered happiness. Now we know how to think. Now we know how to feel. Now we know how to build in the world. And then what we constantly see is that reality constantly overtakes these presentiments towards stasis. So the human being of such a beyond who wants to behold the supreme measures of value of his time must first of all overcome this time in himself. This is the test of his strength, and consequently not only his time, but also his prior aversion and contradiction against this time, his suffering from this time, his untimeliness, his romanticism. And then this gets into whole vistas of thought and feeling related to how the others of any time and place of any culture, the wise men of any time and place in any culture, how they are both timeless and untimely, yet there's no such thing as not being on time, right? We exist where we do. That is the reality. The only differentiation is saying, oh, this man was so advanced in his thought, he could have existed and understood people hundreds of years into the future, unlike these more primitive types who, whether it's that they die off or that, culture just turns them out, right? Destroys them, uses them, those kinds of things. But getting to Zarathustra here, gravity is a theme throughout, and he calls it his archenemy and this little devil. And really what it is again, it's law, it's constraint, it's boundary. It's the idea every time that you have an idea, someone else is going to come along to be like, "Meh, meh, 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 don't do this, don't do that, did you read the sign?" These sorts of things, right? That's gravity, that's constraint, right? And the fact that one's actions and thoughts and feelings are even though like there's no wheel of causality that rolls between those three things, you're held accountable. So therefore, if you commit a crime and you don't have the money to pay off the system, then you actually get charged with that crime. So people know that the avenues or the consequences are very serious. And here in Zarathustra, gravity is mentioned a few times. It shows up in the priest, the dance song, the vision and the enigma, obviously the spirit of gravity itself, and old and new tables. And throughout these constant references, he thoroughly explains the concept, and then, it manifests in the story as a little dwarf, a clumsy mole, a weak spirit that thinks it's the Lord of the earth who isn't even real, which Nietzsche or Zarathustra realizes, and then it completely disappears, right? He becomes free from this awful spirit, with which in it holds punishment and revenge, right, as part of its very power or lording over of the earth. So he talks about it in relation to priests, that the priest is a priest is a priest of gravity. And what he says about the priest is, and he who liveth nigh unto them liveth nigh unto black pools, wherein the toad singeth his song with sweet gravity, right? Where the priest warns, where the priest condemns, where the priest threatens hellfire unless you come back into the playpen of his horrible imagination, and they don't even create anything new anymore. They're just repeating the same ideas of the past. And you can imagine this Stone Age tradition will continue forever into the future, because there's so many people who are mystified by the illusion that seems as if it's real, that they can't help but buy in, and there's no saving them, there's no helping them. It's always been this way. The idea that you're going to liberate, the billions of slave masses of the world, the people who believe that production is real, who are invested in it, who want their piece of the pie and are willing to commit any number of crimes to get a piece of it, right? It's serious. So in the dance song, what he says is, Zarathustra is speaking to the maidens. He's saying, "Don't worry, I'm friendly to maidens. Cease not your dancing, ye lovely maidens. No game spoiler hath come to you with evil eye, no enemy of maidens. God's advocate am I with the devil. He, however, is the spirit of gravity," right? Nietzsche's devil. Zarathustra's devil is gravity. "How could I, ye light-footed ones, be hostile to divine dances, or to maidens' feet with fine ankles?" Ooh, he's getting saucy here. "To be sure, I am a forest, and a night of dark trees, but he who is not afraid of my darkness will find banks full of roses under my cypresses." He goes on to say, "A dance song and satire on the spirit of gravity, my supremest and most powerful devil, who is said to be Lord of the world." The blind mole of culture is that it is slavery. And in modern terms, the modern slave has bought basically what he says, it's not pretty, I know, but he says, if the Greeks perish by their slavery, and by that he means, for instance, the Spartans, I think by the time they fell, they were outnumbered by their slaves 30,000 to 1, right? He said, if they perish by their slavery, then we will perish by a lack of ours, meaning that by trying to give power and responsibility to hundreds of millions and billions of people the world over, reality shows itself, gravity shows itself. These people can't even maintain themselves, let alone a family, let alone a culture, let alone a nation, right? That's just things falling apart, you know. Turns out the Lord of the Earth was tired, I guess. He needs a nap. So this is, next is in the Vision and the Enigma. And in this he says, mutely marching over the scornful clinking of pebbles, trampling the stone that let it slip, thus did my foot force his way upwards. Upwards, in spite of the spirit that drew it downwards, right? So people, culture, dragging him down. This is what culture and people have always done to mankind. The bigger the genius, the stronger the man, the more everyone wants something from him, the more they want a piece of him, the more they want to cling on to him, the more they'll hold him back when he says it's time to move. They're not going to understand his originality. They're not going to understand his soul. So it goes, upwards in spite of the spirit that drew it downwards, towards the abyss, the spirit of gravity, my devil and arch enemy. Upwards, although it sat upon me, half dwarf, half mole, paralyzed, paralyzing, dripping lead in mine ear, and thoughts like drops of lead in my brain, right? Like that feeling of being hunted and haunted, right? That's the insanity of culture. That it almost seems to resemble something closer akin to a a voluntary post-traumatic stress syndrome, meaning the body is safe, the mind is safe, but it continues to live in this rat race of pointless squander, right? It's afraid of everything therein. It knows how it's used and abused therein. Like no one's fooling anyone on that front. Only the drones of culture, can have the luxury of fooling themselves, as Jung calls it, state slavery, right? And that's what Nietzsche says as well, is that these people, they're in the dark about their state instinct. They don't know what the state has in store for them. And this has been a biological process in all history, and it repeats. So, O Zarathustra, the spirit of gravity whispered scornfully, syllable by syllable, thou stone of wisdom, thou threwest thyself high, but every thrown stone must fall, right? Gravity, right? What goes up must come down. Oh, you're feeling pretty good for yourself, young man? Let someone take you down a peg, right? It's just the oldest cruelty and just carelessness and just slavish attitudes and mentalities towards life, who seek to punish, who seek to wield power to punish, because like I said, culture is puerile like this. And in America, people love, I'm not talking jokes, I'm not talking that kind of thing, but even then, jokes are a form of protest, and picking on people is a common human attitude and approach, especially where a group resents an individual for that individual being better, right? So he goes on, O Zarathustra, thou stone of wisdom, thou sling stone, thou star destroyer, thyself threwest thou so high, but every thrown stone must fall, condemned of thyself, and to thine own stoning. O Zarathustra, far indeed threwest thou thy stone, right? He got the hell out of Dodge, right? Away from motherlands and fatherlands to his children's lands to make amends for being the son of his fathers and his mothers, right? He recognizes they're not good people and they're not good enough. They're not special for existing. They're not special for being slaves of culture. They're not special for doing what they have to, right? As everyone always has. The only difference in modern times is, unlike primitive and previous archaic man, men and women have no recourse, like, for what they need to survive. It used to be that humanity was more free to explore the world and find what they need on their own. In some aspect, this hasn't changed, but when everything is owned, when everything is bought and sold, including people themselves, right? I think you see where I'm going with this. So then the dwarf was silent, and it lasted long. The silence, however, oppressed me, and to be thus in pairs, one is verily lonesomer than when alone. Right, it's worse to be with bad company than with no company. Aloneness is already the condition. If you can't learn to enjoy your own company, that spells bad news for the rest of your life. So I ascended, I dreamt, I thought, but everything oppressed me. A sick one did I resemble, whom bad torture wearieth, right? Life is hard to bear, right? And a worse dream reawakeneth out of his first sleep. But there is something in me which I call courage. It hath hitherto slain for me every dejection. This courage at last bade me stand still and say, Dwarf, thou or I, for courage is the best slayer. courage which attacketh. For in every attack there is the sound of triumph. Man, however, is the most courageous animal, therefore hath he overcome every animal. With sound of triumph hath he overcome every pain. Human pain, however, is the sorest pain. Courage slayeth also giddiness at abysses. And where doth man not stand at abysses? Is not seeing itself seeing abysses? Courage is the best slayer. Courage slayeth also fellow suffering. Fellow suffering, however, is the deepest abyss. Right? Everyone says, "Let us drag you down." Right? As the saint warned Zarathustra in the very beginning of the story, don't what do you give? Like he's like, they'll let you help them carry their load. Other than that, if that's not what you're offering, they're not interested in anything you have, because what could you actually have? Right? That's how the blind mole of culture is. So, courage, however, is the best slayer, courage which attacketh. It slayeth even death itself, for it saith, "What was life?" Or, "Was that life?" Question mark. Well, once more. In such speech, however, there is much sound of triumph. He who hath ears to hear, let him hear. "Halt, dwarf," said I, "either I or thou." However, so he's saying it's you or me. I'll kill myself or you go. However, right, and what he says specifically elsewhere is, there are feelings which assaileth one, which are so powerful that either oneself or the feeling must be slain. And that's a profound statement on life or death. Maybe it even gets into the to be or not to be question, but he kind of goes on in there. And then finally we arrive at the spirit of gravity itself. In Old and New Tables, it comes up again. And it says, "Where all time seemed to me a blessed mockery of moments, where necessity was freedom itself, which played happily with the goat of freedom. Where I also found again mine old devil and arch enemy, the spirit of gravity, and all that it created, constraint, law, necessity, and consequence, and purpose, and will, and good, and evil." And remember, what Nietzsche sees with the last man is all these things have run out. That's why it's nihilism, because all these old reasons, all these old purposes, all these old laws, we're beyond good and evil now. For must there not be that which is danced over, danced beyond? Must there not, for the sake of the nimblest be moles and clumsy dwarves? Right, it's like sword fighting. You need to actually fight to learn how to use a sword. Right, like anything else, you have to use it. You have to meet with resistance to understand both limits and potential. So finally, we arrive at spirit of gravity itself. 55. 1. My mouthpiece is of the people. Too coarsely and cordially do I talk for Angora rabbits. And still stranger soundeth my words unto all inkfish and pen foxes. So I think he's saying just, characters of imitation and repetition. These sorts of idle readlers and dabblers, like what they're doing with their intelligence is nothing like what Zarathustra is doing. My hand is a fool's hand. Woe unto all tables and walls and whatever hath room for fool sketching, fool scrawling. My foot is a horse foot. Therewith do I trample and trot over stick and stone in the fields up and down, and am bedeviled with delight in all fast racing. My stomach is surely an eagle's stomach, for it preferreth lamb's flesh. Certainly it is a bird's stomach, nourished with innocent things, and with few ready and impatient to fly away. That is now my nature. Why should there not be something of bird nature therein? And especially that I am hostile to the spirit of gravity. That is bird nature, verily deadly hostile, supremely hostile, originally hostile. So he's saying these are matters of first and last men. These are matters of gods and titans, criminals and conformists, is another way of thinking about it. And where is an intelligent man, or a man who puts forth even something like a disruptive yet new scientific theory? Where is not even someone like that? Where are they not resented? Where do they not upset people? Discovery, change. It's upsetting by nature, because again, when the people of the world constantly say, "We already know, we think we know, we have the answers, we know the values of things," right? He goes on. And especially that I am hostile. Oh, whither hath my hostility not flown and misflown? Therefore could I sing a song, and will sing it, though I be alone in an empty house, and must sing it to mine own ears, right? So again, he's speaking as other, he's speaking as outsider, he's speaking as poet, he's speaking as a original man of culture who creates it and doesn't just consume it and then take it and steal it and claim it's his, right? Other singers are there, to be sure, to be whom only the full house maketh the voice soft. So he's saying only with attention, only with love, only with adoration can they do anything or be anything, and they are nothing without it. He's saying, no, he's alone. This was his fate, right? To be so utterly alone. And that is the condition. So it takes a full house for others' voice to be soft, the hand eloquent, the eye expressive. Fuck, a lot of people can't even do that. The heart wakeful, those I do not resemble, right? He's not, no one catered to him. No one, like, because this has been the devaluing of man with the belief in culture and notions of equality in Christianity, and then liberalism, and then secular belief. It makes the whole thing a wash. It's a mockery of human intelligence and human genius. 2. He who one day teacheth men to fly will have shifted all landmarks. To him all landmarks themselves fly into the air. The earth will be christened anew as the light body. The ostrich runneth faster than the fastest horse, but is also thrusteth its head heavily into the heavy earth. Thus is it with the man who cannot yet fly, right? No, don't want to look, don't want to look, right? That kind of thing. Heavy unto him are earth and life, and so willeth the spirit of gravity, right? And this is why the camel ladens himself up, because without that, there's going to be no lion, there's going to be no child. Another way of thinking it is most men live and die as camels. They're just beasts of burden. And then generally by their sour attitude and their cruelty and their desire and pettiness and any kind of power they can garner in the world, usually you can see who and what they really are come out, right? And this is something that men and women have been having to live with and deal with for thousands of years now. So he who would become light and be a bird must love himself. Thus do I teach, right? And this is what we've been talking about in these literary analyses with neighbor love, the friend. You can go check out those videos recorded in the last few weeks on this channel and these playlists. So, not to be sure, with the love of the sick and the infected, for with them sinketh even self-love, right? That yes, the selfish, the sick, the infected, they will drag even the brightest spirit down. And I've seen it so many times where I come from, especially for people who come from the bottom. They are just dragged down, chewed up, spit out by even their own families, and then especially by their own culture or their boss, or however it goes. It's just life is an exploitative affair. So one must learn to love oneself. Thus do I teach, with a wholesome and healthy love, that one may endure to be with oneself and not go roving about, right? What do you say about neighbors, right? This one go because he seeketh to flee himself. This one goes as if to be unselfish to his neighbor, but they're both trying to just escape themselves. Such roving about christeneth itself brotherly love. With these words hath there hitherto been the best lying and dissembling. Right, so he's talking about that was a cover. That was a cover for the weak and the pathetic, and nowadays it's no different. And especially by those who have been burdensome to everyone. Yes, right, of course. Of course, people hedge their bets when they know, or I guess a best example in modern media, its culmination was the figure Jerry Smith in Rick and Morty. He's a predator of pity. He predates on people by being so damn pitiable that they take pity on him and either don't hurt him, don't kill him, or kind of like Zarathustra says, they allow him to live. So, going on, and verily it is no commandment for today and tomorrow to learn to love oneself. Rather, it is all the arts of the finest, the subtlest, the last, and the most patient. For to its possessor is all possession well concealed, and of all treasure pits one is last excavated. There we go, there it is. So causes the spirit of gravity, right? That it pushes, the whole point of law, culture, constraint is to keep selves out of themselves. It's to basically to chain the ego, or to chain the actor's ego, and the actor is still going to act in their own self-interest. And like the prey animals, the predator learns to use these same systems and moralities as a camouflage. So this is why there is a hatred for intelligence and for priestcraft in the world, because the game is up. I know there's a lot of people who, blinded by culture themselves, think that their promotion of culture is a promotion of love. Like I said, that disillusionment when you realize culture and religion aren't innocent. They aren't anyone's friends. They're not there to expand consciousness. They're there to bind it, right? And only the most naive people. This is why the New Age movement is a wash and a bust, and arguably causes more mental illness than it could ever cure, because these people are naive and stupid and they don't know what they're getting into. They don't understand their own culture. They certainly don't understand other people's culture. They don't understand history. They don't understand eternal recurrence, and they certainly don't understand bird nature and gravity. So he's saying that because of that, it's the reason why one's own treasure pit is excavated last. Because you've been pushed out of it so long, by the time you say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't seem so evil. This just seems like love. Oh, it's my love, right? Anyway, almost in the cradle are we apportioned with heavy words and worths, good and evil. So call this itself this dowry. For the sake of it we are forgiven for living. And therefore suffereth one little children to come unto one, to forbid them betimes to love themselves. No, no, you got to sacrifice yourself to the herd, little Jimmy. This is what I've seen in a country like America. I see that most people who come from the bottom, they actually raise their children to be disposable worker units. They raise them and condition them to be the same frustrated, impotent, disposable social unit that they are. So that's exactly what he's talking about here. You're forbidding them to love themselves, to value themselves, to put themselves above others, right? Nope, you are food for the herd, and that's what most people have always been. So causeth the spirit of gravity, and we bear loyally what is apportioned unto us on hard shoulders over rugged mountains. And when we sweat, then do people say to us, yeah, life is hard to bear, but man himself only is hard to bear. The reason thereof is that he carrieth too many extraneous things on his shoulders. Right, like seeking validation and purpose and attention from a herd of consumers. Like the camel kneeleth he down, right? And consumers who are in it for themselves, right? Like you'd have to be really naive and treat yourself as utterly disposable to buy in what modern culture sells. I've warned before, I'm going to warn again. Don't buy what any of these people are selling. Letting himself be well laden, especially the strong load-bearing man, right? It is noble. It is noble to do your duty. It is noble to be a good worker and to have good attitude. However, how that's treated, it's stupid to then let yourself be exploited. So, and many internal things in the man are like the oyster, repulsive and slippery and hard to grasp, so that an elegant shell with elegant adornment must plead for them. But this art also must one learn, to have a shell, and a fine appearance and sagacious blindness. So, and that's a willingness to be deceived. Let every rogue deceive you so you can see who and what they really are. Again, it deceiveth about many things in man, that many a shell is poor and pitiable, and too much of a shell, right? Hard, crunchy. Much concealed goodness and power is never dreamt of. The choicest dainties find no tasters. Women know that, the choicest of them, a little fatter, a little leaner. Oh, how much fate is in so little. And he's talking about women knowing that of man. That, yeah, this guy's not exactly a consolation prize, but at least the children will be an improvement with her intelligence and her culture, right? So, man is difficult to discover, and unto himself most difficult of all. Often lieth the spirit concerning the soul, so causeth the spirit of gravity. Right, he's saying, no, don't be deceived by people who say, ooh, it's a mystery who and what you are. No, if you're aware of who and what you are, you have a memory of that. And if you look back on how your own instincts and kind of intuitive and thoughtful functions have driven you in life, you can see how it's pushed you to develop your own taste. So you don't need some mediocre priest, some politician, some institutionalized nut job in a culture of nut jobs to tell you who and what you are. The idea that anyone could actually do that is insane, because how could someone outside of you know you better than yourself? Only if you bought in to the bullshit safety net of what is a juvenile species idea of what culture is and means. So going on, he, however, hath discovered himself who saith, this is my good and evil. Therewith hath he silenced the mole and the dwarf who say, good for all, evil for all. Right? So he's saying putting one's own values first and not just an against, because the against is what keeps the mole alive. The mole needs someone to step on it or no one would even notice it, right? So, verily, neither do I like those who call everything good in this world the best of all, right? There you go, Voltaire. Those do I call the all-satisfied. All-satisfiedness, which knoweth how to taste everything. That is not the best taste. I honor the refractory, fastidious tongues, and stomachs which have learned to say aye and yea and nay. To chew and digest everything, however, that is the genuine swine nature. Ever to say, yeah, and hath only the ass learnt, and those like it, yeah, right? That's how you're supposed to say that. Deep yellow and hot red, so wanteth my taste. It mixeth blood with all colors. He, however, who whitewashes his house, betrayeth unto me a whitewashed soul, right? A world of just whitewashed souls. That's what modern American consumer culture is. Um, and I know that the independent, and thank hell for independent artists and media. Otherwise, this culture would just be repeating the same tired tropes of which, arguably the introverts and the artists created all of these things to begin with. It wasn't the businessman, it wasn't the extroverts. These people just capitalized on the creative types and the creative tendency and the creative need, sucked it dry, and now they sold it out to AI. So, with mummies, some fall in love, others with phantoms, both alike hostile to all flesh and blood. So he's talking about the past. He's talking about the undead, right? Vampires, liches, zombies, oh my, these spooks that haunt the mind, right? Whether it's old religious voices and a belief in eternity, or modern scientific institutionalized thinking, right? It can be a number of things. But either way, these are zombies, he's saying. With mummies some fall in love, others with phantoms, both alike hostile to all flesh and blood. Oh, how repugnant are both to my taste, for I love blood. And there I will not reside and abide, where every one spitteth and speweth. That is now my taste. Rather would I live amongst thieves and perjurers. Nobody carrieth gold in his mouth. Right? So he's saying the fact that some people can speak well and talk a good rap, it doesn't mean anything. It's not worth anything. Still more repugnant unto me, however, are all lick spittles, and the most repugnant animal of man that I found did I christen parasite. It would not love, and would yet live by love, right? Just those who attach themselves out of need. Unhappy do I call those who have only one choice, either to be an evil beast or evil beast tamers, right? Because that's the dynamic. That's the master-slave dynamic. That's the tyrant-slave dynamic we've been discussing for all of history. Amongst such would I not build my tabernacle. Unhappy do I also call those who have either ever to wait. Unhappy do I also call those who have ever to wait. They are repugnant to my taste. All the toll gatherers and traders and kings and other land keepers and shopkeepers, right? Verily, I learned waiting, and also thoroughly so, but only waiting for myself, right? These other people, they already have everything, and they want more, and still it's never enough. Verily I learned waiting also, and thoroughly so, but only waiting for myself. And above all did I learn standing and walking and running and leaping and climbing and dancing. And now we've come full circle. If you remember where we began with the excerpt in the gay science, is it 390, right? No, the Wanderer speaks. One has to be very light to drive one's will to knowledge into such a distance, as it were, beyond one's time, to create for oneself eyes to survey millennium, and moreover clear skies in these eyes. Oh, and there's another aphorism which I might post on screen or elsewhere, but maybe get into on another literary analysis video. But it's called the third eye, and it's about theater, politics, and again, this kind of thinking. One must have liberated oneself from many things that oppress, inhibit, hold down, and make heavy precisely us Europeans today, right? Be free of the gloomy past. Be free of the PTSD of culture and parents and nonsense. The human beings of such a beyond who wants to behold the supreme measures of value of his time must first of all overcome this time in himself. This is the test of his strength, and consequently not only his time, but also his prior aversion and contradictions against this time. And where does he say it specifically? One has to rise, climb, or fly beyond good and evil. There it is. So he's going on. So past the whitewashed souls of culture, with mummies some fall in love. How repugnant are they to my taste? For I love blood. Right? He loves what's real. He loves the moment. He loves what's living, not the carefully collected and pinned bloodless butterflies and phantoms of the past that everyone's so goo goo gaga over. Right? Insanity, it's called. Nonsense. Right? Because it's removed from one's senses, one's physical, real sense of life and being, not just the intuition, but also how thinking formulates one's ability to adapt to the very situation. So Unhappy do I call those who ever have to wait. They are repugnant to my taste, right? Again, all the parasites, all the greedy grabbers, all the hungerers and defenders of fences, right? Verily I learned also and thoroughly so, but only waiting for myself. And above all did I learn standing and walking and running and leaping and climbing and dancing. This, however, is my teaching. He who wishes one day to fly must first learn standing and walking and running and climbing and dancing. One doth not fly into flying. So one has to develop one's thinking. One has to develop one's psychic organs. One has to develop and put a lot into one's intuition to let that bake over time, right? We're not unconscious. We're just always learning. And if we're not learning, we're stagnating, right? You're being held up by the illusional safety net of culture, right? That you believe someone somewhere knows something and is in control of what, right? Look at any crime statistic. A crime happens, and how long does it take for the police to get there, right? That's reality. With rope ladders learned I to reach many a window. With nimble legs did I climb high mast. To sit on high masts of perception seemed like to me no small bliss. To flicker like small flames on high masts, a small light, certainly, but a great comfort to castaway sailors and shipwrecked ones. Right. Here's your consolation prize. You saw what no one else saw, you see what no one else sees, and you're the one who gets to pay for it. And people won't value it because they won't understand, and their notions of equality are insanity. So by diverse ways and wendings did I arrive at my truth. Not by one ladder did I mount to the height where mine eyes roveth into my remoteness. Right? It wasn't one thing. It wasn't the fact that he was a student of his culture. It wasn't the fact that he was born to his father was a priest. It wasn't just the fact that there's all these little aspects that make up different parts of his life. What Nietzsche writes in Ecce Homo is that him becoming himself wasn't dependent on any one thing, but him doing and being a lot of different things at a lot of different points in time in his life, whether that was alone or with and in relation to other people, right? But it's a complicated, again, back to the idea of philosophy, of the philosophy of the mountain being one of switchbacks. You have to get to this side and then that side, and you basically have to scrabble up the last steps on your own to fall off to then even begin to see where you ever were in the first place. The idea, again, of the outsider to culture, the one who sees through and recognizes, oh, this is a story for children. In the real world, it's much different. But I'll go ahead and finish reading here because there's only a few lines left. So by diverse ways and wendings did I arrive at my truth, not by one ladder, right? So and it's also not like he just went to the institution, or that he had one teacher, or that he learned from one thinker, or it was one question or one answer. No, it's complicated. It's unseen, to the point that by the time the genius relates his discovery back to people and culture, he puts it in a respectable package out of necessity. It's otherwise also its own form of insanity, like what he said earlier with that drivenness in the intellectual type, right? They do have their own curious manias. And unwillingly only did I ask my way, right? Out of necessity, need and change of need. We've all dealt with that. We all deal with that. We'll all have to deal with that in the future. That was always counter to my taste. And unwillingly only did I ask my way. That was always counter to my taste, but it was need. Rather did I question and test the ways themselves, right? So once he was given a method or idea, he examined it. Is this true? A testing and a questioning have been all my traveling, right? So there you go. It's not just, if you accept what people buy and sell here, basically, I'll use Terence McKenna's separation. Okay, you're either the one doing the creating and the selling, or you're the mark. That's what you need to understand about culture, especially modern culture. It's consumer fanaticism. It's an orgy of destruction. It's beige and boring, increasingly techno-feudalism and techno-fascism, right? So it's not by chance, and it wasn't being given or sold by others. He figured it out for himself. Redemption. Everyone has to figure it out for themselves, and the devil will always take the hindmost. Why do you think the devil himself, the spirit of gravity, is so hostile to everything that's not at the center of the herd, right? Which it believes to be the center of existence and the center of the action. Contrary to this, the outsider. Anyway, attesting and questioning hath been all my traveling, and verily one must also learn to answer such questioning, right? So at the end of the day, you need an answer for your own questions. Otherwise, where does that leave you? Back in the same morass. The bird crashes in that case, I guess. That, however, is my taste, right? To get the answers, to create the answers. Neither a good nor a bad taste, but my taste, of which I have no long either shame or secrecy, right? So let me repeat that again. The difference of like men and children of culture, babies of culture, neither a good nor a bad taste, but my taste, of which I have no longer either shame or secrecy, right? Culture teaches shame and secrecy. It's paranoia. It's institutionalized paranoia to maintain itself. It has to be. This is now my way. Where is yours? Thus did I answer those who asked me the way. For the way it doth not exist. Damn Skippy. Damn right. One forges one's own way, or it's someone else's trail. It's been seen and known before. How could that be you? Again, the idea that your instincts, your taste have been guiding you all along, and if you could but trust your intuition. But again, all of gravity exists to pull the individual back. The blind mole of culture exists to be overcome by those who can do the overcoming. And once more, the devil has always taken the hindmost, and that's why everyone's always afraid of the adversary, the other, to the point of needing scapegoats in perpetuity. Otherwise, the story of good and evil has no story. For the God to exist, you need a devil, and that devil needs to be as eternal as God himself. Culture. Anyway, thanks for checking out the channel. Thanks for your time. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed the view. I'll be doing a lot more of this. So again, if we're fortunate enough to be here tomorrow, I'll see you then. In the meantime, please like, share, and if you know other people interested in literature, literary analysis, these sorts of approaches and devising new means and methods by way of exploring these things, please send this to them, share this with them, whatever the case may be. But either way, I appreciate your time and attention. Have a good one, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.